A few weeks ago I made a video covering the recent allegations made around the voice actor Sean Chiplock. He's well known for some of his roles in various animes like ReZero and more recently Genshin Impact and the amazing digital circus. If you managed to miss it, I'll give a brief summary. Basically, a Twitter user came out on behalf of someone called Casper accusing Sean of grooming and sending inappropriate messages to them when they were underage. Sean then responded and there was a back and forth with Casper then getting involved with the discourse as well. It ended with Sean rejecting the accusations, leaving us here in current day where he's posted a tweet with an attached document going through everything in great detail, which I'll go through now. The tweet reads, "Very recently a number of untrue but incredibly harmful accusations have been made about me, regarding a brief conversation from over a decade ago. With this public statement I hope to provide context, refute these claims, and address what really happened. I'm both devastated and repulsed, not only by what was said, but that those things continued to be repeated long after those falsehoods were quickly disproven. My hope is to finally be able to resume focus on my career and communities, free from any more defamatory harassment. Defending myself against this was both costly and exhausting. I'm making the effort to clean up my account of this and move forward. I plan and want to keep sharing my own successes as well as those of others. I'm just newly aware of the impact online strangers can have on my life. I hope the identification and call out of legitimate abusers continues. I hope that victims continue to find and obtain the closure and support they deserve. I also hope that no one undeserving ever has to go through what I was subjected to, including those who gleefully spread it. Obviously Sean's had a lot to go through with these accusations, but I'm glad he's taking the time to go through everything and put it all in one place for people to refer back to in the future." Attached to the tweet he posted a doc going through and disproving Casper's previous statements. To start with, he goes through Casper's previous aliases, which will be important to refer back to later on. These names are Pyroro, Victini, Pokesmooch, Sawbucks, Sylphorn, Disorder, Gorge, and Kobu. To set the stage of how some of the aforementioned conversations took place, Sean gives some background into his education, studying psychology, focusing on health, and sex ed. So it was obviously a big part of his life at the time and influenced how he might be engaging with people online. This led to the voice clips part where he would be requested to make audio of himself or have certain discussions with people because of his education at the time. His community and people around him felt safe enough to do this with him, and he gained experience and a better understanding of people alongside it. Sean spent a lot of time in 18+ chat rooms to have more of these discussions, which is where he eventually met Casper. They met conversing about an 18+ artist on a site where 18+ content was present, which Casper would have had to opt in to see, which is why he thought Casper was at least 18 at the time. Sean then goes on to show a screenshot where Casper is admitting to being in the spaces he shouldn't have been, and was active in the furry fandom from ages 11 to 12 onward. Underneath that, there's also various images of Casper's various accounts on these websites, some of which clearly showing he was listed as 18 or 19 and 20 at the time. There were some others who noticed this over on Twitter previously, which Sean then corrects that Fur Affinity is not an 18+ website, which users must be a minimum of 13 age to sign up, but it does require users to self-identify as 18+ in their account before they can post, comment on, or view illicit material. This leads into their Skype conversations, starting with Sean's initial message that was intended to be a joke, and a friend request that Casper proceeded to accept. He then goes on to say that they chatted back and forth, but unfortunately since Skype 8 was released, it deleted all previous conversations way back in 2018, which you can see confirmed in his conversation with Skype support. With what Sean's saying here, it contradicts Casper's previous statement about reaching out to him on Skype for the first time with this message, as they'd obviously been DMing about stuff of similar nature way before this on the furry sites. He goes on to say that these conversations would revolve around Casper asking things related to voiceover and Sean's performances, and Sean asked questions about their gender identity. From Sean's perspective, they were asking things they're each not familiar with and wanted to learn more about in the context of being mutually consenting adults. Another part of the Twitter discourse was Casper's contradicting statements, which Sean goes into more detail about. He initially stated that they had only spoken for 1 hour, with his initial message on Skype coming out of nowhere, whereas he'd previously stated that they'd been talking on Fur Affinity and then move over to Skype. After this, he moves on to talking about the response he made over on Reddit. In this, he initially thought that a person called Melanie and Casper were the same person, as there was a situation that occurred with Melanie trying to get Sean removed off of Games Done Quick as a volunteer. It turned out that they were just separate people, and Melanie was trying to spread awareness of the messages, which you can see in the following screenshots. With all that said, this goes on to the more recent stuff that happened the other month, which I talked about in my previous video. One of the major points was that Sean initially apologized to Casper for his behavior after his initial response. Sean clarifies that this wasn't him admitting to messaging Casper knowing he was underage. He instead wanted to apologize because he'd unknowingly made Casper uncomfortable, because he fully believed that he was over 18 at the time. Sean had no way of knowing that Casper was uncomfortable and apologizes once again for any of the conversations that made them uncomfortable in 2013, and proceeds to reflect that regardless, it wasn't really appropriate to be having these kind of conversations to begin with, especially with someone he'd only recently met. Given their back and forth, Sean was clearly under the impression that Casper was okay with the topics discussed at the time, but in hindsight completely understands how it would have been off-putting given their history. Had Casper expressed any discomfort at the time, Sean says he would have apologized and stopped them altogether. Underneath, he wraps up with a good response saying, "With all that said, this conversation could not have happened in the first place if you didn't pretend to be over the age of 18 when you were not, as well as directly engage with content a minor is not supposed to be engaging with. Blaming others for discussing adult topics in a conversation that's believed to be between mutually consenting adults is not acceptable. Open and honest communication is an integral part of any respectful conversation, and withholding or falsifying information makes misunderstandings extremely likely." There's also attached screenshots basically providing more insight into Casper's masquerade as someone who is 18+, which I'll throw up on screen as well. Overall, I think Sean did a good job responding here, and I'm glad he took the time to compile everything and make a clear page for people to come back to later and refer to whenever this inevitably gets brought back up again. Obviously, Sean should have been messaging them in the first place, but he was obviously under the impression that they were conversing as two consenting adults and not someone underage. This also seems to be a one-off situation with Sean, as surely over 10 years someone else would have come forward if it was more serious or a constant behavior. As Sean previously mentioned, he was talking to plenty of other people other than Casper. It just goes to show how careful you have to be when conversing with people online, especially about sensitive topics. Anyway, that's all I wanted to cover in this video. Let me know your thoughts on Sean's response down below in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.